Have you ever come across an anime that sneaks up on you and makes you think, wait a minute, why is this so good? How did this happen? Yeah, that's what Frieren did to me. I'll be real with you. I didn't expect much when I first heard about Frieren. The story takes place after the big heroic journey, you know? Like, we're supposed to care what happens after the epic battle's already won? My brain was like, this is just a victory lap, right? Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. In the next few minutes, I'm gonna tell you why Frieren has quickly become one of the best fantasy anime I've seen in the last few years.
Alright, so let's talk about the World of Frieren. This anime is set in a post-heroic world. The big bad has been defeated. The hero and his party have already saved the world, and everyone's now living happily ever after. Or are they? Usually, fantasy anime is all about the journey, going from one epic battle to the next, with the end goal of defeating some Dark Lord. But Frieren says, hey, what if we check in on our heroes after they've done all that? What happens to these people when the mission is over, when there's no grand evil to fight anymore? And that's where the magic happens. We get to explore a world that feels oddly nostalgic, like the aftermath of a dream we once had. But there's something new too, something we rarely see in anime. Instead of focusing on action-packed quests, Frieren shows us the quieter side of life, the slow burn of existence, and the reality that, yeah, sometimes life goes on, even when you're not the hero anymore. It feels like a warm cup of tea after years of gulping down energy drinks. You know what I mean? Calm, reflective, but still packed with a flavor that surprises you.
Now, let's talk about Frieren, our main character. And let me just say, she's not your average anime protagonist. You know how most anime heroes are full of energy, shouting about friendship and justice every 5 seconds? Yeah, Frieren is nothing like that. Frieren's an elf, and elves live a long time. Like, we're talking millennia, which means she experiences time differently from humans. And let's be honest, that's gotta be weird, right? Imagine all your friends getting old and dying while you're still here, looking exactly the same. Sounds like a weird mix of blessing and curse. But that's what makes Frieren so fascinating. She's slow to change, almost emotionally distant. She doesn't really get humans at first. But over time, you see her starting to understand just how precious those fleeting human lives are. It's a process, a really slow one, but it's real. And it's relatable, even though none of us are elves, I think. I can't help but connect with her. Frieren's story isn't just about her growth. It's about the relationships she didn't fully appreciate until they were gone. And if that doesn't hit you right in the feels, I don't know what will. Plus, being immortal sounds cool and all, but let's face it. If I had to watch all my friends die off while I stayed young, I'd probably need some serious therapy. Maybe that's why Frieren's so emotionally distant at the start. Who knows?
Okay, so let's dive into the real heavy stuff, the themes of loss, regret, and moving forward. Frieren is one of those shows that sneaks up on you and drops emotional depth like a hammer, but not in an over-the-top, dramatic way. It's all quiet, subtle, like it's gently nudging you into deep thought before you even realize it. Here's the thing, Frieren is all about time and how we spend it. Frieren herself has all the time in the world, but that doesn't mean she's living in the moment. She spends a lot of the series reflecting on the people she's lost, on things she didn't do, on conversations she never had. And honestly, that hit me harder than I expected. I don't know about you, but I had to sit there and think about my own life for a second. Like, wow, how many times have I not said something I should have? How many times have I let a moment slip by? Of course, this is where I awkwardly joke that I had to call my best friend after a particularly heavy episode, just to remind myself they're still around. But seriously, this show's handling of regret feels so human, so real. It's not a downer, it's a reminder that we can always move forward, even when we carry the weight of the past with us.
Now, let's talk about the art and music because Frieren nails it in a way that's almost sneaky. Like, it doesn't shout at you with flashy fight scenes or ridiculously over-the-top animation. Though, don't get me wrong, I love a good explosion. Instead, It does this amazing thing where it builds this quiet, melancholic atmosphere that pulls you in without you even realizing it. First off, the art direction is gorgeous. There's something about the soft colors and peaceful landscapes that make you feel like you're right there, walking alongside Frieren, just taking it all in. But don't get it twisted. This isn't a typical, look at how pretty everything is type of show. It's more like, wow, this is beautiful, but also a little bittersweet, and why am I feeling all these emotions right now? One of my favorite scenes is when Frieren looks up at the stars. It's so simple, but it says so much without needing words. And honestly, how often do we get that in anime? Usually there's a character monologuing about how they're gonna become the pirate king or whatever, but in Frieren it's just silence. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than any words. Oh, and the music? The music is like a cheat code for emotions. You ever watch a scene that's kind of sad, but the soundtrack makes it feel like someone just turned up the emotional dial to 11? Yeah, that's what Frieren does. The score is so delicate and perfect for the tone of the show. It's the kind of music that makes you realize you're way more invested in this story than you thought. Like, I've definitely had moments where I was minding my own business, watching the show, and then bam! A few notes of the soundtrack hit, and suddenly I'm tearing up like I'm cutting onions in the middle of my living room. Anyone else? Just me? Okay. Alright, let's shift gears for a second and talk about the supporting characters. Now, in a lot of anime, the supporting characters are just there to make the protagonist look good, right? But not in here. They're more than just sidekicks. They're an essential part of the journey. First, we've got Fern, who's like the emotional grounding for Frieren. She's a young mage, kind of quiet, and she brings this balance to Frieren's more distant nature. And then there's Stark, who is basically the awkward muscle of the group. I mean, we all have that one friend who's tough, but somehow also a little clueless, right? That's Stark in a nutshell, and I love him for it. What I really appreciate about these characters is how they evolve throughout the story. Frieren isn't the only one growing and learning. Fern and Stark do too. They're not just there to tag along. They each have their own motivations, their own struggles, and their own stories to tell. It makes the whole journey feel richer, more layered, and I know I promised not to say layered, but look, this time it's different, okay? It's like a really good cake, a cake with emotions. You get what I'm saying? There's this great scene where Frieren, Fern, and Stark are sitting around a campfire, and it hit me that this dynamic isn't just about a mentor and her apprentices. It's about friendship, about learning from each other even when you think you've got nothing left to learn. Plus, let's be honest, watching them interact is kind of like hanging out with your own squad. Everyone's got their role. The wise one, the serious one, the goofy one. It's basically anime D&D. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Okay, but there are a ton of fantasy anime out there. Why does Frieren stand out? And that's a fair question, so let me tell you. In a sea of flashy, action-heavy fantasy anime, Frieren stands out by not going for the big explosions and epic sword fights. Don't get me wrong, those shows are fun. I love me some Demon Slayer or Attack on Titan, where every episode feels like the world is about to end. But what Frieren does is different. It goes for quiet moments, introspection, and emotional storytelling. It's not about saving the world anymore. It's about learning how to live in it after the battles are over. And that's what makes Frieren so refreshing. Instead of constant high-octane action, it gives us space to breathe, to think, to reflect. It's a slower pace, sure, but that pace allows for depth. It's like if you've been running a marathon and someone finally hands you a cold glass of water and says, "Hey, maybe sit down and think about why you're running in the first place." There's also something to be said about how Frieren doesn't rely on tropes. You don't get the usual power-up through friendship moments or the screaming to get stronger arcs. Instead, it's more about how the characters grow emotionally, and honestly, that hits a lot harder than any battle cry. Plus, you know it's good when an anime makes you cry, and there's not even a fight going on. Frieren doesn't need to wield a sword to make me feel like I've been stabbed in the heart. She does it with a glance, or a memory, or a simple, "I should have said something back then." Honestly, it's proof that sometimes emotional damage is stronger than any physical attack. So, what's next for Frieren? Honestly, this story feels like it's just getting started, and I couldn't be more excited. Without spoiling too much for those of you still catching up, let's just say that Frieren's journey isn't just about making peace with her past. It's about moving forward and making new connections, even when she thinks she's already seen and done it all. And that's what makes me think this anime has the potential to leave a lasting legacy in the genre. It's not about how powerful the magic is, or how epic the battles are. It's about the quiet moments, the reflections, and the relationships that evolve over time. That's the kind of storytelling that sticks with you, long after the final episode airs. In a way, Frieren is a reminder that it's not about how the journey ends. It's about how you choose to keep going. And honestly, I can't wait to see where Frieren goes next.